Hey you, I'm Sarah Turner, and today I want to talk to you about how I handle criticism, negative comments, and feedback. Basically, all the stuff that feels super scary and icky, and pretty much everyone dreads, especially when you're starting out and you've already got your own imposter syndrome whispering in your ear. You can't do this, sit down, shh, don't talk, don't try, all the things that imposter syndrome says to try and get you to stay small and to not take big actions and big steps to improve your life. I cannot emphasize enough how much I used to struggle with this. I would physically dread emails from clients. I would feel nauseous. I couldn't open them. I would cry. I used to just anticipate horrible, horrible comments. And then when I would get feedback, sometimes I was defensive. I was angry. Everything you can imagine, I have gone through when it comes to that. I'm happy to say that over the years, I've put a ton of work into this, a ton of personal development work, mindset work into this. And now, obviously, of course, there are times where somebody gives me some feedback and I initially get triggered and my blood starts to boil and things like that happen and it doesn't feel good. I am human. But for the most part, I can let a lot slide off my back. And so I want to give you some tips as to how I kind of got to that place. So the first things first is our initial reaction, like when your heart starts to race and you're sweating, that is a triggered response. Do what you can to calm yourself down. Sometimes, here are some of the ways I deal with that. Sometimes I write a response that's totally triggered that I know I'm going to throw away and not use. And that feels good just to get it out on paper or digital paper, right? So sometimes I'll do that and I know I'm not going to use it and I don't send it. But it helps to just kind of get those initial triggered thoughts down on paper. That's also helpful because then you can examine them and think, okay, what is the underlying thing going on here? Is it kicking up fear that I feel like I'm not really good enough? Is it kicking up imposter syndrome? Is it making me feel like a bad person? It could be all kinds of things. So writing down that initial triggered response really helps me identify what is really happening here. The other thing is you got to calm yourself down before you respond. So sleeping on it is one of the best things you can do. In fact, it's really funny. I don't really do this as much anymore, but when I would write down that triggered initial response, it's like, ah, and then read it the next day, I would be like, wow, I can't believe I felt like that. It felt so big and so scary, and it doesn't feel that big and scary anymore. And so sleeping on it is huge. You do not have to respond right away. In fact, that's one of the things I really recommend to entrepreneurs. Don't respond to your email right away. I have a 24-hour rule. So I don't respond to emails, or I make sure I respond to them within 24 hours. So you do not need to respond right away. In fact, it's probably better if you don't. So sleep on it. The other thing that's worth keeping in mind is this an online interaction? Because it is much easier to misinterpret what somebody's trying to say over text, email, social media comment. When we interact online, there is a lack of empathy because we don't see the person, we don't see their facial expressions, we don't hear the tone in their voice, and it makes us add our own story to their words. And that can be really, really problematic. So keep in mind that if this is something that you're experiencing or reading over text, there's already a lack of empathy and understanding that just innately comes within online interactions. So going back to identifying your trigger, because when you hear negative feedback, there's usually something that is underlying. Maybe it's that you're not good enough. Maybe that you think you're an imposter. Maybe you feel like maybe you're a fraud. Maybe you are just afraid that you're going to fail. Maybe you're afraid you're going to succeed. That's a big one that surprises lots of people. But taking the time to actually write it down and figure out what it is will give you some insight into how you can address it in the future. Maybe you need to add affirmations to your morning routine. Maybe you need to keep a Google Doc of all the positive responses and feedback you've gotten. That was another one that helped me. I would keep a document that had all the times clients said, oh my gosh, this was amazing. Because we also tend to focus on the negative things people say rather than the positive. So when I was feeling particularly crappy, I could open that up and be like, all right, I've done a lot of really good things. So that's something that really helps. Keep in mind that your brain holds on to memories when there's a higher or a more elevated emotion. So again, when you are triggered and there's fear or anger or resentment or something like that, it's going to be more likely that your brain remembers it. So it's really important to keep track of all the good stuff. And then this is one of the most important things is it is so important to cultivate an understanding within yourself that most people's reactions are actually a reflection of themselves. That doesn't mean that you should disregard all feedback and negative criticism. But for example, the more that my social media presence has grown online, the more I get people who are just have reactions and write comments that are like, I read them and I'm like, whoa, how did they pull what they just interpreted from what I said? That's not what I meant at all. And then I feel really misunderstood and super frustrated and triggered and like, no, and I just want to defend myself and defend my point. But what I've come to learn is that when somebody has a really like strong emotional response to something that you say or you do or you write or you submit to a client, it's often a reflection of them and what's going on in their life, what they're feeling, what you said that kind of maybe brushed up against a personal experience from their past. And even with client work, like sometimes with clients, they will give you feedback and criticism that's like not necessarily a true and accurate representation of your work. Again, this is not to say that you should ignore or disregard feedback, because it's really helpful and really beneficial to take it seriously and to learn from it, especially when it comes from a client. But keep in mind, we are not all gonna get along. It's just like, we're not gonna necessarily, like, we're not all gonna be friends. We're not gonna all see eye to eye. We have different experiences and backgrounds. And so that is the same thing with your clients. Not all of your clients or not all the people you try to work with are gonna like your writing. This is true for famous authors. Every single famous writer in this world has people that dislike their writing. It is just a fact of life. So keeping that in the forefront of your mind, knowing that you are not for everyone is okay, and doing what you can to kind of cultivate that acceptance is going to help you so much, because you're not for everyone. Your writing's not for everyone, your voice is not for everyone, but that's okay. That's how you find your people. That's how you find your ideal client. That is how you create a life, a career that is, more true to you. And then the other thing that I want to keep in mind is that you can build a tolerance to dealing with criticism, negative comments, and feedback. The more you expose yourself to something, the more that you are going to build a tolerance for it. So you can build a tolerance to these things to where you practice every time something like this happens. You practice saying to yourself, okay, maybe you create some affirmations. Maybe this person isn't for me. Maybe I triggered something in them. Maybe I can find a way to, increase the empathy I have for them and understanding where they might be coming from. Every time you do that, it gets a little bit easier. It's like building a tolerance to your fears and handling all of these things. Like I said, over the years, especially as I've kind of grown my accessibility online and my visibility online, and more of a variety of people come across my material, the more I am subjected to people who are just like, what are you talking about? I don't like you. And that is something that I've had to work on, but I promise the more I expose myself to it, the more I work through the triggers, the more I remind myself that, I'm not for everyone and it's okay, the easier it gets. And that honestly is one of the best gifts of entrepreneurship for me, because I used to walk through life so afraid of not being liked, of not being accepted. And I've come pretty much full circle to understand that that's just, you're not going to be accepted and loved by everyone. It's just not possible. And so I want to leave you with one of my favorite books that helped me with this. It's a super short book, easy to read. It's The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel. It is so wonderful. And it talks about just, 4 simple practices to put into your life to kind of make it so that you don't go through life constantly feeling like a victim and triggered and, a victim to your emotions. And one of the agreements is to learn how to not take things personally. Again, the book is super tiny. You could read it probably in an afternoon, but it talks about how not to take things personally and the gift that it gives you to kind of move through the world without, as much worry or concern as to what other people think. And it's just been super helpful for me in that way. And anyone who is going to be an entrepreneur, a freelancer, and get, feedback from clients really will benefit from taking the time to kind of cultivate this in your life and in your experience. So it's something that is a work in progress, but I really believe it's one of the most important things you can do because, again, I started doing this work for, my clients and so that I could respond to them more calmly and enjoy my work and not, be destroyed every time I got negative feedback. But it's spilled over into my life, and that has been a really big blessing because to not take things personally means that you're not walking through the world like a victim, and that is just a very empowering feeling. So I hope that helps. It is a big deal. It's really hard, but it's worth the work. You will feel better in the end. So start that list of positive feedback that you can pull out as you're practicing this. You might find you eventually don't need it. That was my experience. And if you have any ideas of like what's helped you not take things personally, please share them in the comments because I am always trying to work on this and help others work on this because it's super important. And of course, if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. That's how I know that you liked it. You want to see more things like this. And don't forget to subscribe. See you guys next time. Thanks.